like Swedish.
So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon session. It's a very special plenary session on the Commission's response to the COVID-19 pandemic when it comes to research and innovation. As you know, this pandemic has already reached almost 32 million cases worldwide. We already have almost 1 million people have lost their lives. It has also dramatically affected our economies, our social fabric, and our mental health. And it's likely to have lasting changes on the way we work and the way we live. So what has the Commission done in response to, and may I say, in anticipation of the crisis in the area of research and innovation? Where are we now? What remains to be done? And how do we prepare for future threats that are likely to emerge? And focusing on research and innovation, how can the European research and innovation continue to contribute to combat COVID-19? And how can we make sure that the results of the European research projects reach patients, frontline workers, industry, and policymakers in Europe and beyond? We have three distinguished speakers today that will help answer these questions. We have Commissioner Mariya Gabriel, who will present the Commission's leading role and comprehensive action. We have Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist at the World Health Organization, who will talk about the global impacts of the pandemic and the need for cooperation. And finally, Professor Piot, Director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Special Advisor to President Ursula von der Leyen on the response to the coronavirus and COVID-19. And he will review the current situation from a scientific perspective, highlighting the priorities to fight this pandemic and to better prepare future threats. So now it's my pleasure to invite Commissioner Mariya Gabriel, who is Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture and Youth, and Education, I should say as well, to tell us more about the Commission's actions. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Irene, ladies and gentlemen. This is a great pleasure for me to be in such prestigious company. And at the same time, really thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to so many of you on this subject, which has taken a big part of our lives since the beginning of this year and does not yet show signs of abating. A lot has been done to address the pandemic by mobilizing the power, the research and innovation to find solutions. In fact, this is an understatement. More has been done faster and with more intense cooperation at European and global level than ever. This is fantastic to see, and the Commission will continue to encourage and facilitate this. And I must say since the beginning that cooperation at global level, systematic sharing of results, joining efforts, pooling resources to ensure that everyone has access to diagnostics, treatments and vaccines, this extraordinary level of cooperation should be the new normal. And on my side as Commissioner for Research, Innovation, Education, Culture and Youth, I would like today to focus my introductory remarks on 5 main points. First, what was our contribution since the beginning of this crisis? What we have seen that we have at our disposal instruments and resources that can be mobilized very quickly and can be flexible in order to allow our researchers to work as soon as possible in order to find solutions. That's why I'm really very grateful to my team, because that was an extraordinary work done these last 6 months. That's in January. By the end of January, we published the first call, and we selected 18 projects. At this time, we had with us 151 research teams working on the three main issues: diagnostic, treatment, and vaccine. That was not all our actions. Immediately after, we reoriented some of our projects, and that means how important it is to continue to invest in long-term in research innovation. Concrete example is our private-public partnership Innovative Medicine Initiative. They were extremely engaged since the beginnings too. The third example is that with the European Innovation Council, we very rapidly offered the possibility of our startups and our SMEs to innovate and to propose us solutions. So I think that in only 3-4 months, we have seen that with the European Innovation Council, with the public-private partnerships in Horizon Europe, and with our investments in research that were made for many years before, we were able, in a flexible way, in a very rapid way, to mobilize resources and to bring people to work together on common challenges in order to find common solutions. The second aspect that I would like to insist, what we have seen this time, that how important it is to coordinate and to cooperate between our member states as European Union. I'm very proud that in less than 1 month, we managed to have with our member states an ERA versus Corona action plan. And one concrete example, in less than 15 days, we made operational a data platform. It's extremely important to continue to work on this in order to share data in real time, in order to allow really to pool resources. And that was very encouraging for us, because in the first 5 months since its launch in April, we received more than 2.7 million requests for data from over 78,000 different users. And this platform now will continue under the new Horizon Europe program. And I think that, again, here we have a very concrete example how rapid data sharing and access accelerate scientific discovery and innovation for the benefit of the society. And I see this initiative as a blueprint for the integration of health data for research, paving the way, why not, for the future European health data space. The third aspect, it was for us extremely important since the beginning to be engaged together with our citizens. That's why in April we organized the biggest in the world hackathon with 21,000 participants and with more than 2,000 solutions. In only few days, we managed to bring together citizens, civil society, representatives from the public and the private sector in order to elaborate common solutions. What was my main conclusion is that it's not only important to have hackathons, but most importantly is to organize matchathons in order really to see how the idea meets the investors, the networking necessary in order to realize these disruptive ideas. The other important aspect is it was the European leadership that our President von der Leyen has shown since the beginning of this crisis in order to have a real global coordination. Thank you very much, World Health Organization, because this good idea for the pledging conference in less than 5 weeks, we managed to transform it in a so noble cause. I will always remember how our first initial ambition, it was to have $7.5 billion for treatments, vaccines, and diagnostic, and the final result is 16 billion. That was possible only because we joined forces, we worked together, and we have a very clear message to all our citizens: universal access. Access affordable for all citizens in the world, not only for Europe, but for every citizen in all the states in the world. And I think that this message was not only strong for future actions, but now we can build on this experience in order to scale up and to have further initiatives on the different aspects in this domain of health in order to achieve more quickly and better results. Now, all this was possible because there was a long-term investment in research and innovation. You can imagine, as Commissioner for Research and Innovation, I will not say anything else. It was impossible because we need to preserve the flexibility. That was one of the lessons learned from this crisis in order to be able to reorient projects, sometimes prepared before for many years, and most importantly, to anticipate. That's why I think that now it's time to think about the next steps. And that's why I'm so proud that together with the President von der Leyen, we published our vaccine strategy in June, because we are not talking about the first phase, the development of a vaccine, but we are talking here about manufacturing capacities, and we are talking about distribution. So I'm very grateful that thanks to all of you present during this panel, we have shown exactly that we are able to anticipate, we are able to provide solutions, because above all, it's for our citizens, but we are doing that since the beginning with them, with a crucial role for research and innovation. That will be my message today, and I would like really to stop here and to say again how important it is to continue not only to talk about what's happened the last 6-7 months, but how to be better prepared for next crisis, because no one can predict the next one, but for sure we need to be better prepared for the entire world, for all citizens in this world, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I will now ask Dr. Soumya Swaminathan. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, who is the chief scientist at the World Health Organization. And prior to that, she was WHO's Deputy Director General for programs, pediatrician by training. She's a globally recognized researcher on tuberculosis and on HIV. And she brings with her 30 years of experience in clinical care and research, and has worked throughout her career to translate research into impactful programs. She will speak on the global impacts of the pandemic and the need for cooperation. Soumya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Irene. And greetings to Commissioner Gabriel, Dr. Piot, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to join you remotely. And I was just thinking back very fondly about last year when I came to Brussels, and I was present, physically at the European Research and Innovation Days. And I must say that it was an amazing experience. I don't think I've been to a conference like that. And I was, full of, just the very interactive and vibrant atmosphere that it had. So it's a pity that this year we cannot be together again physically, but I'm glad that we still get a chance to interact with each other. So first of all, I must congratulate Commissioner Mariya Gabriel on the comments that you've made, and also on the manifesto, the European COVID-19 Research Manifesto, which clearly has the principles of open access, of data sharing, including IP during the period of the pandemic, to ensure that health products and health policies are available to people in the spirit of global solidarity, without really considerations of where the IP is protected or where people are able to pay. So this is an amazing initiative, and I would like to congratulate you for that. To go back to the beginning of the pandemic, of course, we are passing very grim milestones every day. And as Irene just pointed out, we've crossed 31 million cases and 1 million deaths globally and growing. Unfortunately, the pandemic is showing no signs of slowing down. And even in areas of the world which had managed to control it to a large extent, like in Europe, we are now seeing it coming back because economies are opening up, people have started moving around, And the virus is just basically waiting to exploit the vulnerabilities of people. The majority of us around the world are still susceptible. Less than 10% have had the infection and may have some antibodies, though again, we don't know how long immunity is going to last. We realized very early on that the solution would come from science. And in fact, this is something that Commissioner Gabriel has talked about when she said knowledge and innovation saves lives. That's very true. And so we convened the first Global Research Forum in Geneva on February 11th and 12th. We had very strong participation from across Europe, including from the European Commission. And we also had the GLOPID-R group of agencies that fund research on infectious diseases. It was jointly organized with GLOPID-R. And this meeting came out, 400 scientists, academics, researchers, and doctors spent 2 days and came out with a research roadmap highlighting the knowledge gaps and the research priorities. Since then, of course, we've come a long way. We've learned a lot in the last 8 months. And in July, we reconvened again virtually this time. And we had over 1,400 people joining in this 2-day summit, again, to go over what we've learned and what the remaining big priorities are. What's different now from previous pandemics, I think, has been the technology and the science that we've had. And as Commissioner Gabriel pointed out, the preparedness. I think investing in institutions, investing in human resources, and investing in top-class scientific capacities pays off at times like this. A good example is the fact that the genetic sequence of the virus was shared on January 12th, the first 6 sequences from China, on a public database called GISAID, which was set up 10 years ago to share influenza gene sequences. This is hosted in Germany. And they very quickly were able to set up a platform for the new virus, SARS-CoV-2. And today, there are over 100,000 of these whole genome sequences available on GISAID, available for scientists around the world to work on, to collaborate on, to look at how the virus is evolving, where the mutations are going, and what implications that might have, both for new drugs as well as vaccines. So all of these are examples of things which were done a decade or so ago, but which are playing an important role today. And because of the fact that we could have access to the genetic sequence data so quickly, the very next day, we had diagnostics, in fact, developed by Christian Drosten and colleagues at Charité Hospital and made available globally so that labs all over the world could start testing samples for this new coronavirus. And also vaccine development started very early because of, again, investments that have been made by CEPI and other organizations into developing platforms, new platforms like the RNA and the DNA vaccine platforms, where as soon as you have the genetic sequence of the known protein, you can insert it and very quickly begin vaccine development. And that's why today we see this unprecedented situation where within 8 months, we have literally hundreds of vaccine candidates in development and over 40 that have now entered human clinical trials. We realized early on that we need global collaboration to advance research, that if we continue to work in silos or work country by country, it's not going to bear fruit as quickly as we would like. And a good example is clinical trials. The International Clinical Trial Registry platform that WHO runs today has over 5,000 clinical trials registered just for COVID-19. The fact is that it's very good to see so much research going on. On the other hand, too many fragmented small projects, again, are not delivering the results that you want. You want to know whether a drug works, whether it reduces mortality, whether it reduces hospitalization. You want to know whether a vaccine is safe and efficacious. For this, you need also coordination. And that is why we set about with the solidarity series of protocols, starting with the therapeutics protocol, where again, Europe has played a very important role. When we started the Solidarity Therapeutics trial on the 1st of April, it was the European countries like France, Norway, Spain, and Italy that actually had big outbreaks going on. and were enrolling cases very rapidly. The advantage of having a global platform to do clinical trials is that as the epidemic has moved from continent to continent, and it has ebbed and waned, we've been able to continue enrollment. And today we have over 27 countries participating in the Solidarity Therapeutics trial with over 12,000 patients enrolled. And we're now looking at the second phase of the trial, looking at immunomodulators, at monoclonal antibodies, and so on. But the platform has been developed. Similarly, we are trying to develop a platform for vaccine trials, which would enable multiple vaccine candidates to be brought in and tested against one common standard of care arm, and that would allow also this, provide the opportunity to developers from around the world to have their vaccines tested in a robust and efficient manner. And also, again, having this global set of clinical trial sites participating enables us also to make sure that that you're always enrolling in places where there is high transmission of infection going on. So I think these are very good examples of global collaboration. The GISAID platform for sequences, the European data platform, I think would be a wonderful test case if it works for COVID. Really, WHO is also very committed into having that kind of health data platforms where there can be global collaboration and solutions found to health problems. Because after all, health is not a national issue. It's an issue for all of humanity. And therefore, products that are developed should really be considered as global public goods. And so I think this is a great initiative, and we should try to expand and build and strengthen that. And finally, I'll just say a word about the ACT Accelerator that Commissioner Gabriel mentioned was launched by the Director General, Dr. Tedros, and President von der Leyen on April 24th. It's again unprecedented that so many global institutions, as well as member states and the private sector, were able to come together so quickly and develop the work plans on vaccines, on therapeutics, on diagnostics, but also on the health systems piece, the connector which will be needed to deliver all of these new tools. And within the last 4.5 months or so, already we can see success. We now know the COVAX facility has over 160 countries that will be participating, covering over 2/3 of the world's population. This is unprecedented. There's been tremendous political commitment to the principles of equity and fair allocation, both for vaccines and other products. And of course, the coming months will show how successful we have been, really, and whether we have been able to be true to our stated principles of equity, of fair distribution. But just the coming together and the investments that have been made, both on R&D as well as on the delivery side and the allocation side, are remarkable. As Dr. Tedros always likes to use, the 3 words are science, solidarity, and solutions. And I think that's something that we can celebrate today, not just hopefully to bring an acute end to the acute phase of the pandemic by working together, but also preparing for subsequent emergencies, whether it's new infectious diseases or other health problems which affect all of us, or in fact, other existential threats to us, like climate change, like antimicrobial resistance. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you very much, Soumya, for those words, and also showing how much she's done at European, but also at global level, because this is indeed one of the biggest global challenges that we have ever faced. It's now my great pleasure to invite Dr. Piot. Peter has considerable experience in his domain. He co-discovered the Ebola virus in Zaire in 1976, if I'm well informed, and led pioneering research on HIV/AIDS, women's health and infectious diseases, mostly in Africa. He later directed the United Nations AIDS program for 10 years before becoming director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicines. So we were not surprised when Commissioner or President von der Leyen appointed him as her special advisor on the response of the coronavirus and COVID-19. And he's also a member of the scientific advisory panel that provides the Commission with recommendations on the response on the pandemic, including policy measures for addressing also its long-term consequences. So Peter will now speak on the progress so far in the fight against COVID-19 and the next challenges for research. Peter.
Thank you very much, Irene. Hello, everybody. Great to on the panel with Commissioner and with Soumya. I won't repeat that COVID-19 pandemic is nothing but a catastrophe, but I always see silver linings, and I think there are quite a few also, and they were already mentioned by the two previous speakers. There's really a remarkable speed of discovery, of knowledge generation, of development of products that I, in my lifetime at least, I've never heard. Some of it facilitated by new technologies, as Soumya mentioned, but also equally important, because data are being shared far more than before. I remember in previous epidemics I was involved in Ebola in West Africa and SARS, and then frankly that was definitely not the case. So there is progress on that side, and I think that is a tribute to everybody. And you could argue, of course, this should happen, but it's not always the case. And I think that the European COVID data platform, I was stunned to hear how many people are using it. That is really open science, far more than sometimes the bureaucratic approach to open science. This is really, I like that a lot. So that is unparalleled. And also, of course, we should not neglect what Soumya also mentioned, that nearly all countries have initially been successful in bringing down new infections with pretty rudimentary type of measures. But now we're faced with a recrudescence, with outbreaks and so on, and it shows that we're only at the beginning of this pandemic. I mean, it's not a nice message to give, but we have to be realistic. This is going to be with us for a long time, and that means also that research and innovation not only has to deal with the immediate now, but also with the long term. And however, despite all this progress, there are still, I would say, a quasi-existential uncertainty remains as to where we're going, where this epidemic will go. And we heard how the Commission has been very active. Commissioner Gabriel gave some really nice summary of it. Given, let's say, the time limit, so I'll concentrate mostly on vaccines and a bit on therapeutics, but then try to broaden it. First of all, a vaccine is probably essential to contribute to, I would say, end the crisis, managing the pandemic. I don't think it's a silver bullet, and I'll come back to that. But without one, I think we're in deep, deep trouble. But biologically, I'm optimistic that it's possible. There are good reasons to believe that, given the fact that our natural immune response can get rid of the virus, that means that a vaccine should be possible. That's unlike, for example, another virus that I've been working on, HIV, where nearly 40 years after the discovery of the virus, we still don't have a vaccine. And one of the reasons being that once you're infected, it's extremely rare to get rid of the virus. Now, there have been huge investments. We heard it already. Again, unprecedented from industry, from the public sector, from the Commission, from EU member states. We're talking here about billions and tens of billions. Also in the US, of course, there is CEPI, a new mechanism that didn't exist until a few years ago. And then the Accelerator, I think, is again, could become a model for future collaborations internationally. And that is really, for me, what I love about it is it brings together everybody who is part of the solution, which is pretty unusual. I mean, you know, usually, oh, it's the companies, the private sector there, and there's the public sector, and then the NGOs are there, and we don't talk to each other. Here, we're all under one roof. That means that it's not easy, but it means that if it works, it's going to create really synergies that are unprecedented. And at the same time, it bears in mind access and equitable access. So the COVAX pillar of it, and I think it's also an exemplary way for WHO and the European Union, the European Commission, to work together in a way that I think was, frankly, is also new at this scale. Now, you read that there are over 240 plus candidates, vaccine candidates, but they're not all equal. And when you look at it, which ones will make it to the market, that's probably going to be a minority. We are now at 9, or is it 10 now, candidates that are in so-called phase 3 phase. In other words, trying to figure out how effective are they? Do they protect? And because yesterday, Johnson & Johnson announced that they started a 60,000 people trial in multiple countries. So that's the latest joining the league of the phase 3 trials. And that means that the first ones, we could expect some results of the trials. That doesn't mean the vaccine is there. Maybe before the end of the year, maybe early next year. I think I would hesitate to put a very precise date on it. Some of these platforms are relatively classical ways of producing vaccines. And so we can, we know particularly about their safety and how to produce and manufacture them. Others are, very innovative, the RNA and the DNA type of vaccine platforms. And they've never come to the market. And that's at the same time exciting, but also concerning in the sense that we have to make sure that we are absolutely certain that they work, that they're safe. Now, we have to also remember that normally it takes easily 10 years to develop a vaccine, to bring it to the market from a brilliant idea, from something that seems to work in the lab and maybe in mice and so on, and that it's really, licensed. And the success rate is also usually way below 10%. That's why there are not that many companies in vaccine business, and it's really expensive to develop it. Here we need to do all that now, tomorrow, in a year. And that has not only challenges, we can cut on the bureaucracy, we can cut on many things, but there are certain things where we can absolutely not take any shortcuts. And so we need to, first of all, you have to demonstrate that it works. And that it works also, for example, in vulnerable populations. In the case of COVID, that means older people like me, like I, so over 70, 80, where several vaccines are less effective. So we need to do that, and that requires clinical trials, no way around that, and that requires time. Secondly, this has to be safe. We are going to inject biological material in probably billions of people, never done before. So we need to make sure that we have the best possible guarantee of safety. And that will require also continuing research once the vaccines are introduced. Thirdly, we need enough of that. So in other words, manufacturing. That capacity is not there yet, but we've been working on. And the dilemma is that normally a company, even if they say we're doing end-to-end approach, before you start constructing a new factory, which could easily cost 300-400 million euro and takes a year to set up, you wait until you have a very, very good, reasonable idea that this works and is safe. We can't afford to wait for that. So both companies and societies need to take extraordinary risks of a mega investment to make sure that once a product is there to go to scale, is licensed, that it can reach the people as soon as possible. Then we need the distribution, the fourth issue, also challenging, even in high-income countries. And finally, let's make sure will people accept it, because there are indications from some countries where a substantive proportion of people are really saying, no, we won't take that vaccine. So it's not just a technological fix that we're talking about. So the pressure is very high, also politically in some countries. And I was very pleased last week to read a statement by the CEOs of some big pharma vaccine producers and biotech companies saying that they will not take any shortcut and will respect all the rules, the game for bringing vaccines to, to the market and to the public. Now, a few words about the state of play in terms of treatment. As Soumya said, huge number of trials, but I'm afraid that this is not always a good thing, because many will not have the sample size that will lead to, to actually meaningful conclusions, and that shouldn't happen. So joining efforts is really, really important. But we've already learned that, remdesivir can work, that we need, that dexamethasone is effective. But I think we are, we've approached this in a bit of a naive way, thinking, okay, this is a viral infection and I'm an infectious disease physician and microbiologist, so okay, you want to kill the bug, the microbe, the virus, and that's it. COVID-19 is a far more complex infection and disease. And I experienced it myself when I had it, where actually for months, there is, the lungs are affected, other body organs, and it's really the immune response. So we'll need to sophisticate far more these trials. So we are really going to an area where we'll have to refine these clinical trials and also pay attention to the chronic sequelae. Now, what about the future? Will a vaccine really end this epidemic? As I mentioned, it's key, but it's not the silver bullet. And there's a lot of debate. What can we expect from the first generation of vaccines? It's rare that they are, the full, fully highly effective. Maybe it's only 50% preventing disease and death, which would be, of course, a good step in the right direction. But we'll need to think again and plan for the longer term. We'll need to continue the non-medical interventions that are being applied now, even when the vaccine is there. Let's not be an illusion. But I'm very pleased that the European Commission has reacted very promptly, as Commissioner Gabriel said, and that we have the strong leadership of the President of the Commission, which is also important, that when you look at her State of the Union speech, there was quite a strong section on it. But I think we need to do more. We need to do more and take a long-term view in addition to addressing the acute crisis. One, strengthening our capacity in Europe for development of vaccines, manufacturing, stockpiling. And I was very pleased to read and to hear that the President proposed the creation of a European fund, a BARDA type, that we, I think, desperately need and which would have been very, very useful. So I hope that that will become reality as soon as possible, even this year. Secondly, more than ever, we need better coordination and management of trials, what Soumya's point. Treatment, but also we need at the European level, a network for vaccine and clinical trials. And I'm not thinking only about phase 3, but given the speed with which vaccines will come on the market, so-called phase 4 and post-introduction will be extremely important to figure out what the efficacy, effectiveness here, and side effects are. And thirdly, we need to go beyond the biomedical. It's time that we invest the social sciences, the impact, and so on of the. And lastly, I would say, and I won't repeat what others said, step up international collaboration. Two things I'd like to mention. Europe has this EDCTP, a very important initiative working with particularly African countries. Africa CDC is stepping up. And we have in India, there are the major manufacturers for vaccines. So there are lots of opportunities and duties. And so let me end now. I think we need to plan for a future of societies living with COVID-19. whatever that means. And that's going to require also a research agenda dealing with inequalities, mental health, chronic conditions, urban planning, etc. So this is going to be the next agenda, and also connect two top priorities for the Commission: the green agenda, because climate change and the risk for new pandemics, so the next big one, is very clear, and also the digital agenda with people remotely working. Now, one thing is sure, this is not the last big one. There will be others. So let's not miss this opportunity. It's a historic responsibility to capitalize on the crisis and make sure we are more resilient and better prepared. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this very enlightening and also very sobering overview of where we are today in addressing COVID-19. Of course, we have encouraging progress made, but we still need to do a lot more. We have a few minutes left of this session, but we would like to invite those of you who are participating remote to this session to also see what you think are the most important areas for new and increased investments in research and innovation to combat COVID-19 and or for society to recover from the pandemic. In this session so far, we have heard a lot about the very acute actions that we have invested and done, vaccines, therapy, diagnostics, but as Peter also alluded to, we also have other questions such as the socio-economic aspects, equality, mental health. Also, we may have disruptive innovations coming through that we haven't thought about before that we would like to bring forward. So feel free to come with your ideas of what you think we should do as our next steps in our research and innovation agendas. And while you are thinking and start to feed in your answers to that one, I will ask the speakers in the sessions if on their wish list what they would like to do. Soumya, maybe I start with you. What would be top on your agenda?
Yes, thanks, Irene. I think some of the things that you mentioned are key. I think having networks of institutions that can do clinical research, that can build cohorts, both in children and pregnant women, facility-based cohorts and community-based cohorts are going to be extremely important for the future, not just for COVID, but even beyond that, in order to then do research on other diseases, to also use that as a platform to do clinical trials for new therapies or new diagnostics. So I think, it takes time to build the trust and to build the capacity also of people. And you do need multidisciplinary teams in order to do research. There are many, small challenges which can actually add up and become big bureaucratic hurdles, like ethics committee approvals. If you're doing multicentric studies, you need a mechanism for that. Regulatory approvals. For a region like Europe, every country has to provide regulatory approval for a clinical trial protocol. That adds a lot of time. So trying to harmonize some of these mechanisms, and of course, you talked about the data pool, doing that for other diseases. I just wanted to mention that less than half of the countries that report COVID data to us provide sex and age disaggregated data. So we're not even able to do such basic analyses on age and sex. So we need that support, that training, and Europe can actually partner with other countries who already have mechanisms to partner in Africa, possibly Asia as well, so that we build both the capacity as well as the relationships between scientists, because I think that trust is important to build that trust. And traditionally, there's been a sort of a north-south divide in research relationships, and that now needs to be brought on an equal footing. Researchers in the South now are very well, their capacity is very high, and they know what their local priorities are. And so that's the kind of environment I think we want to build. And really, we must think about these global partnerships. Within Europe is good, it's fine, but it needs to be beyond that. because then you have this diversity, which always adds value. And I would like to emphasize the value of social and behavioral science. We've recently set up a behavioral insights technical advisory group because we realize that for public health to work and for messages to work, our traditional approaches are not always successful. And so we have now the experts on behavioral insights to guide us on how our messaging needs to be done to have maximum impact. And of course, we're also working with a lot of tech companies around the world, particularly those who have big social media platforms. And we find that's had a huge impact. It's made a huge difference to how much our messages are able to get out to people.
Thank you, Soumya, for those words. I think that we will need to round it up for this session. I would like to thank Commissioner Gabriel, Piot, and Soumya for your insightful and thought-provoking presentations. We still have some way to go before we are past COVID-19. But thank you very much for being with us today. And I wish you all a good afternoon and stay safe.